So with that, why don't we start with an easy one? Can you talk me through what a normal work day where you're seeing clients looks like?
I can. The easiest answer is there's not a normal workday.
Okay.
So I can give you two different normal workdays.
Okay.
Normal workday A is I sort of have a checklist of my weekly bookkeeping and business management tasks. So I'll spend probably a few hours catching up people's QuickBooks, their YNAB accounts,
Mhm.
answering emails, making sure that things that are my responsibility to check when things are due are handled. Um, Lots of email questions, lots and lots. I got this in the mail. Do I need to worry about it? Um, my accountant asked me this. What does that mean? So there's like a translation piece that usually goes along with that. Normal workday B, actually, yesterday was pretty interesting. Um, when I meet with people in person or by video,
Mhm.
so I had one client where I do his books and I'm his business manager. I also did some coaching with him. Him and his associate are looking at their 2020 plans.
Mhm.
And I talked them through some clarifying questions of, well, you want to make more money. How much more? By when? Just getting more specific about it so they can get some traction.
Mhm.
That was a great meeting. I started with a new coaching client yesterday who has been living paycheck to paycheck, even though there's plenty of income.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to be teaching her how to use YNAB, how to make a realistic budget. And there's a lot of work around mindset.
Mhm.
Like, so often people go, I need a budget. And it's like, oh, I need to get a lot tighter. And I want to work with people so they're not just doing binge purge cycle.
Mhm.
So some of that education piece, as we do the practical education, that happens a lot. I had a phone call with an ongoing client who's just doing great,
Mhm.
working on getting out of debt, working on boundaries in basically before his clients were taking 60 to 90 days to pay,
Mhm.
and he didn't want to bother them
Oh no.
to get them to keep the agreement that they made. So sometimes, like role playing, okay, what are you afraid they might say?
Mhm.
What's actually right here? So that type of communication coaching as well. Those are typical-ish kind of days.
Mhm. Okay. Um, and I know you have your hands in lots of different types of financial related activities, some of it coaching, some of it different types of disciplines. So I'll ask you some questions about your practice or the things that you hear from clients. I think for the purposes of our conversation and my research, the whether it's in coaching or whether it's in the more practical bookkeeping related stuff or the things you do with small businesses or individuals, um, looking at it would be great to talk specifically about kind of the things that are happening under the covers. What are the things under the hood that inform the situations people find themselves in, the practical stuff that you're also helping them with. So when you first begin interacting with someone, either in a coaching capacity or helping them with some other financial activity, what is normally the circumstance that they find themselves in? And I'm guessing it's not one specific circumstance, but what are the types of things that characterize the positions they're in when they seek out a money coach or a financial professional that they're looking for help from?
There's almost always an external pain point.
Hmm.
I haven't had someone necessarily come and say, everything's great. I just want to study this for the fun of it. not once, 10 years, not once.
Yeah.
So there's always a, oh God, I'm getting audited. Um, oh, I got this huge tax bill and I've known I need to do something about this and it's time. Um, my partner and I can't stop fighting about it and we're not getting anywhere. Um, I am desperate to keep my business, but I'm not making enough money and there's not enough left over. I don't know where it goes.
Mm.
Those those are it's typically like that, like, oh my God type of thing,
Yeah.
even though lots and lots and lots went into creating that situation over time.
Mm. And what is your how do you approach entering those situations? What's your, where do you normally begin with them, and what are you trying to? How do you normally try and get into something deeper beyond just putting out the fire of whatever that external situation is?
Something that I put on my initial questionnaire, or when people are sort of like reaching out because they're interested, I put on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to change the situation?
Mm.
And when I get fours and fives back, oh, okay. So probably, like, for me, there's a correlation between what I teach is not easy to do,
Mm.
especially if someone has like codependency issues or traumas around finances or difficulty speaking up for themselves. What I teach people, it's hard, it's really growthy, it's really lifey, but I don't want to disappoint that person, but they're gonna little but I like it when I just pick up the check all the time and don't have to ask someone to pay me back.
Mhm.
So if that motivation is low, it's like, okay, noted. So probably, I'm glad to get started. Maybe their motivation will increase, but usually if someone is looking for just a quick kind of surface fix,
Mhm.
that to me is probably not going to be the best fit.
Mhm.
I tend to work with holistically, how is the person loving themselves in action?
Mhm.
And that's hard work.
Mhm.
So there needs to be a, no, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm ready. There's a 12-step saying that I like, that you can't save face and save your ass at the same time.
I like that.
So yeah, if someone still needs to save face and still needs to behave as if they have a certain amount of money, even if they don't,
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to save their ass yet, from what I've learned and what I've experienced.
Mm. So once I mean, in that, as you explore where they find themselves and the things that are going on, and you start getting into kind of the root things that are happening for them internally, whether it's, you know, codependence, or, just kind of like inherited attitudes towards money, or, whatever the thing may be. Do you have you if you look back on your experience over the last 10 years, what are the types of things that inform those internal attitudes or beliefs? Are they primarily things that happen to people when they're little kids? Is it stuff that happens to them as an adult? Are they primarily psychological versus, tangible material things? Any observations you have around kind of thematic um, characteristics would be interesting.
I love that question. I can see categories for sure,
Mm.
and putting it into words, I mean, the first thing to say is it's probably everything. It's probably a life condition,
Yeah.
but then to get a little more specific about it, often I think we're in a really interesting generation where so many people's parents, like, God bless all of us, but a lot of people were raised in kind of a desert of truth and knowing how to be with emotions. And it seems like the generations before us tended to put things under the rug, keep a stiff upper lip. It's fine, almost like a puritanical thing. And I don't know if I noticed that more because that was my experience or because legitimately, yeah, lots of people's parents, grandparents were, you soldier through, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you know, that seems to be part of it. I heard this term along the way that I think is just brilliant, of financial infidelity. So the trauma of that, for some reason, we're not supposed to talk about it like we can talk about if someone has an affair.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that happening in previous generations, and then families not dealing with it directly or in a connected way or with even support, like an isolated system getting more and more isolated. That I've seen happen either in previous generations, the financial infidelity, or this generation. Gender conditioning, I think, is so heavy and thick. And, well, if the man is the breadwinner, he gets to do whatever he wants with the money. So we've inherited that, even though it can be pretty rare these days for anyone, especially in the Bay Area, to be able to have a family and have a life just on one income. Sometimes also, though, if a family is living that dream, well, is the main breadwinner ever even home to be with the family? Because if they're working all the time, that's like a grief that then people aren't supposed to talk about because, well, I'm so lucky, I don't have to work, I'm just raising the kids, or what have you. But your partner's not ever home. Do you ever get to sink into quality time together? Things like that. I do think the pressure of consumer culture, social media culture, I think that has intense psychological ramifications that are a combination of very modern, new aspects that maybe our brains haven't fully been able to have the boundaries we need just kind of naturally, but it also blends in these archaic tribal influences. So I think people are kind of walloped by that, especially when they're super tired, they're already running on fumes, to kind of resist the combination of that machine that's so excited to receive our money and so excited to profit themselves, because that's how they're set up and that's just how it is now. And then if the person is already feeling scared, frustrated, sad, hopeless, any of that stuff, it's like, oh, I have the thing that's going to make you feel better. And then there's the element also of money being so much more electronic. And some of the research that we've seen, it doesn't register like any kind of, ouch, there goes my money, when we spend electronically, even when we're holding a card in our hand. So how are people supposed to know that it's having an impact on their overall finances when it's just the flow of life just happening? It's tough.
It's true. That's the most, I've asked that question to a handful of money coaches, and you just gave the most coherent survey of the landscape that I've heard so far. So to go back to your, I like the term financial infidelity. To double click on that and play back what I heard, you're saying, the kind of it, we are better at addressing if it's an actual physical romantic infidelity, that there is more vocabulary, more social conditioning around opening up to that conversation. If it's observing, somebody in this generation or our parents' generation who observed somebody before them, um, financially kind of going outside of what was discussed as the priorities for the family, not necessarily in a romantic context, but dad goes off and uses money for drinking, or dad goes off and uses money for gambling or whatever. Not as much transparency or vocabulary or any of the stuff that you would need to actually dig into that. That trauma.
And what precedes that as well is, are people in a partnership equally empowered
Mhm.
to know what's happening with the finances? I am amazed how many people say, I just have no idea. I've definitely had a good example of a fairly typical client is a person is getting divorced, and it can actually be man, woman. Like I haven't seen this one be as standardized, but person's getting divorced, they're going out on their own, and they say the other person did all the money stuff. I don't know how to do this. I
Mhm.
don't know how much my life costs. I don't know how to track it. That is a real woo.
Mhm.
That is a Sometimes people get motivated to get empowered quickly, and sometimes their, I would say, subconscious pull for being dependent just deepens.
Mhm.
And then their body might need to manifest a sickness,
Mhm.
or they might need to lose a job and be like, see, I still need help. You can't leave me like this. And it's interesting to see sometimes the spouse who wanted the divorce, who's maybe driving that, then will still sometimes completely pay for that person to not rock that boat too much.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting. Married or divorced, it doesn't mean certain things to everybody necessarily. So
Mhm.
then I look at, well, what messaging comes before that, that someone takes it on themselves to either feel like, absolutely, sure, I'll pay for your life. Like, we're divorced, we're not even hanging out anymore, but I feel like I owe you something for whatever reason,
Mhm.
versus, no, you're not my problem anymore. I'm
Mhm.
not, I'll give you what the court says I have to give you, but
Mhm.
that's it. And oh, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, me too. The deeper I get into this, the gender piece of things um, is more and more striking to me. I mean, even in the Bay Area, where you would think traditional gender roles would hold less weight than in other places. I did a fairly, I mean, as extensive as I could figure, you know, survey of the money coaching landscape. Um, Even just money coaches, the kind of a leadership role in somebody in helping somebody coach their financial lives, and it's still like an 80-20 split as far as I can tell, female to male. There's just not that many male money coaches out there. And then I'm in my own relationship with a money coach, and she runs a large online facilitated program that's got hundreds of people in it. And from what I understand of her comments, it's like 85-15, 80-20 in terms of her clients as well. I don't. Is that similar type ratios in your practice?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I love it when a man makes it through to me. I love knowing what he must be inside of himself, kind of giving up
Hmm.
to agree to work together. Um, that to me is very appealing and it's an honor. Um, I love working with LGBT community, very, very close to my heart. That's so interesting how, to me, should we even actually call it gender conditioning? Because same-sex couples have
Mm,
often a similar polarization of, this is the one that takes care of X, Y, and Z and is maybe tougher, is maybe a little bit less emotionally available, and then maybe the other is more the nurturer. That can still happen,
mm,
and that's not about gender.
mhm,
So that's fascinating to me. And then how much of that is just, okay, so nature likes a polarization and we're drawn to kind of opposites in some ways.
mhm,
um, there's not necessarily an ideal though. So what I like to remind people is, we're not drawn together to hang out with someone who reminds us of ourselves all the time. So I think it's good for the soul to have kind of some friction, and like that egoic arising of, why are they doing it wrong? They're not doing it like I do it.
Right.
And to find like a bigger perspective.
Mm. Yeah, what you're describing is definitely, I wouldn't be in this position now without 6 years with a partner who triggers all of those reactions that you just described, or 5 years of individual therapy just to get to the point where I could start unlocking some openness around money. Uh, so it's like work to get to the place where you could actually start, a new set of work.
Yes.
Which is sad in a lot of ways. I think, if you read in racial justice literature, gender equality literature, that the the oppressor in lots of those situations is deprived of their humanity in much the same way that the oppressed is. Um, and it is hard for me to understand in lots of ways as a white straight male, but when it comes to money, it comes alive because the pressure that I put on myself to be a certain thing based on what the expectations were I formulated as I was growing up, uh, has held me back, continues to hold me back from a fuller version of myself. So I think
It's individual prison.
yeah, truly.
It's I can't let life just occur through me moment to moment because this is my job. I decided in advance.
Yeah.
And the control mechanisms that society needed way, way, way before
Hmm.
anything was sort of modernized, or any conveniences or things like that. I get it. Like, they needed people to sort of not cannibalize each other. And there had to be a way of like, oh no, actually, here we are on this earth, we work together. And then you do your job and you do your job and you're like that and you're like that. So I get it that it had to be that way for a certain time, but I definitely feel that call to support people in their evolution and go, are your basic needs met?
Hmm.
Is there a basic level of safety? Okay, great. So then can we open up that box, maybe change the shape a little bit? Can we get you some more breathing room in there? And then I'm pretty sure society will be able to still move forward as a whole if you
Yeah.
do something a little bit differently. But those control patterns, they're in ourselves.
Hmm.
It can be a trance, absolutely.
Yeah. To go back to your practice, I think we've touched on it a little bit in pieces, but so people come in, they've got their stuff, you very eloquently kind of synthesize what some of the major forces are that play into that. What is it that you're trying to get them to? What is a healthy relationship with money in the context of your professional practice?
I want to find for them, how can they identify what their priorities are in life? And that means synthesizing internal and external information.
Mm,
So I want to teach them the tools that they're aware of what's happening with their finances, but not always just looking in the rearview mirror. I want to teach them how to look through the windshield, how to make a plan, and how to, so for example, I work with a couple that, oh, they've just done a great job about showing up, and they came to me with the goal to be able to travel more. That was at the top of both of their goals lists.
Mm.
The top, that's important. That seemed like our work would have, everything would have triangulated. So all we need to do is free up more of their disposable income so they can put it towards travel. Done, right? Not done. In the course of their learning their YNAB, talking with each other more, diving into themselves more, they totally changed that top goal. They want to save for a house.
Hmm.
And it's as if the travel goal never existed now that they got more information and worked with each other more. And we've been sitting together, and it's sort of like that skill of getting to what's the actual external thing. That's, to me, that's the end result, because they may get a little bit further in the process and say, oh, we thought if we bought a home, it would get us this, this, and this.
Hmm.
But now with what we know, we actually want this.
Hmm.
And then the skills are so transferable no matter what the external goal is.
Hmm.
So it's really that, what would be the internalized skills is tracking, making a predictive plan, and learning how to adjust when the plan needs to change. Also, it's the day by day. Like, one of the biggest disconnects I see is people will put together a pristine budget, and then it's like this sense of false relief of, great, I've got a budget, but then they don't change their behavior. Oops.
Sure.
So I know I went through that as well. Like, wait a second, but I had a budget, but then my numbers didn't look like that. So that kind of self-dialogue and dialogue with other, teaching couples especially how to stay on the same team with each other.
Hmm.
I think that can be really challenging for people in relationships, is to not start to look at the other one as enemy, especially when they bring home a big bag full of whatever, but we had a budget and you don't even know what's in the bag. So like the grounding and the presence to know, okay, I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling like I'm not going to have any money left over for retirement because they went shopping again. Just like being able to take that inventory and then also dialogue, not just swallow it.
So it sounds like it's for you, organizing it around an external goal then becomes kind of a more manageable little case study that you can then start having this conversation about what's happening internally, because then it's less theoretical, doesn't feel like therapy. It's just kind of like, all right, so you want to go travel more, let's figure out how we make that happen. And along the way you get access to some of these, whether it's the emotional stuff that's happening under the hood or things from way back in childhood, those will come up, but you at least have a way of contextualizing them relative to this goal they've defined.
Yes. I really like the GROW model, and I tend to walk people through how do they use that. So G is what the goal is. R is what's the reality? What are some of the obstacles? What have they experienced already? Basically, why don't they have it already type of thing. The O would be the options. And sometimes the mind can go either so black or white, like, I'll never have that, or that'll be easy, why haven't I done it yet, or what have you. But just, okay, what are the options there are lots of different ways to get to that goal. And then W is ways forward. That's when they commit to taking certain actions within a certain time frame.
Hmm.
that will hopefully move them closer to that goal.
Hmm.
We do need a specific example for them to work with so they can learn the model. But
Hmm.
then once they've learned the model, they learn the model.
Hmm. What methods have you found successful for, let's say you get into an engagement with a client and you define a goal, you're talking about, you're trying to plot what the reality is, and as you get into the reality of their current situation, let's say that they are making, that the part of the problem is that they are really overspending because there is something happening emotionally about what money means to them and an insecurity that's gone unaddressed. And so that's what's fueling the problematic reality that they find themselves in and constraining them in terms of the options and ways forward that they have before them. Um, how do you build bridges between something as deep seated as a fear you have about what other people think of you, um, and something practical like building a budget or another more applied financial skill?
Yeah, I really listen deeply to where a person is at moment to moment, because sometimes they're in the place where they're not going to be able to take in any practical information until they get some stuff off their chest.
Hmm.
And then it can feel more like a therapeutic interaction.
Hmm.
And what touches my heart about this work is the number of times I've heard in my career someone say, I've never told anyone that.
Hmm.
I could never tell my spouse that.
Hmm.
And like the sacredness of hearing that and knowing that my reaction is, oh, okay, yeah, I've heard that before, kind of on the inside. And to them, it seemed like this huge, gnarly, shameful, all of that.
Hmm.
And just to be that person who's like, okay, thanks for telling me,
Hmm.
but not like, get out of my office now, just like
Yeah.
that sort of normalizing force is extremely sacred to me. It's almost like we're clearing someone's buffer to
Hmm.
be able to then focus on the practical skills sometimes.
Hmm.
So that's going to be the approach with someone who is more emotionally motivated.
Hmm.
I'm a very sensitive person. So for me to be present in the work as well, I'm not going to dive right into the practical stuff if there feels like this painful elephant in the room.
Hmm.
Let's go ahead and talk about the elephant a little bit. And then the practical stuff, that's just a case of learning something XYZ.
Hmm.
Um, there are other people who I need to approach it a little bit differently. They need to spend the time with me working on the technical skills before they can then trust
Hmm.
to share a little more of the emotional side.
Hmm.
Um, I've had a couple recently say, we're not ready to really go there emotionally.
Hmm.
We just want to learn the tool. And that's challenging, and I'm so glad they said that. I always want people to be honest no matter what.
Hmm.
So the client being able to guide that somewhat, I think, is crucial. My tennis coach is brilliant, and he'll remind me sometimes, we can take all the time in the world for you to get this, because he'll say, I already know it. I don't need to prove to you that I know it. It's important that you get it. That's what we're here for.
Hmm.
So to stay out of trying to get them to learn things so I can check it off my list,
Hmm.
that staying out of that place and just going where they need to be and where they're wanting to guide it,
Hmm.
with some encouraging sometimes to
mm,
go a little deeper. I feel like that's the nature of my job.
mm. Yeah, it strikes me the something beautiful about money is that it is kind of a really flexible translation mechanism between things that are happening externally in the world, material, really practical as can be, and something really complex, emotional, vulnerable that's happening internally. Money is kind of a bridge for most everybody, me included, between those things. So if you're not ready for, going all the way to the deepest thing, or that's just not who you are or what you're interested in, you can still work on money stuff, and it'll probably lead you to the root cause one way or another. Um, but if you want to go straight to the bottom and dig out your soul and figure out what's going on there too, money flows that way as well.
That
So
is exactly why I love my job. That
yeah.
is exactly why.
Hmm.
And it's as a really emotional person myself, the values that are always measurable are very grounding.
Hmm.
So I don't want someone to spend all of their time processing the emotional stuff. I
Hmm.
want them to get some traction on the physical plane as well.
Yeah.
So then sometimes working with the practical side can kind of dry up some of the watery experience, especially if someone's feeling flooded and things like that.
Hmm.
And sometimes we just need to, because there are degrees of the practical level as well.
Hmm.
Sometimes we just need to look at, okay, what happened in the last 2 weeks?
Hmm.
But 10 years ago, da 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 da. And so, how's it going now? Sometimes that can be a presence tool and a grounding tool. And I think it's really neat. I think it's neat that like money never looks back at us and judges us.
Mhm.
Yet, so many of us are scared about what will the letter from the IRS say, or why is my bank upset with me, or
Mhm.
things like that. And like the money itself, it just is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, its emptiness is kind of, beautiful in a way.
That's why my business used to be called Love the Zeros.
Ah, I like that.
Just yeah, it's just
Wow.
there.
Yeah. Um, so let's talk about, let's add the layer now of how do, financial tools, things that you could get from a bank, whether it's a checking account, a debit card, a credit card, even, if you observe stuff around, insurance or investments, how do those things play into this equation? Where are places where they are fueling people forward in the work, places where they're holding them back? What do you observe in that space?
I think it's fascinating how much of an allegiance people can develop. There's almost like these bonds
Mm,
that people develop with a banking institution.
mm,
Um, I'm convinced that's part of what has kept Wells Fargo in business.
mhm.
People are like, oh, but they've been so good to me. Is this actual? Because they haven't stolen your money, this is being good to you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make light of it because I get into some of that like odd bonding sometimes too.
Mhm.
Um, it's interesting to me, and I'm one of these people who's kind of like a squirrel who puts their nuts in different trees. I
Okay.
tend to diversify. Like I want no less than 3 banks at any given time. And that tells you something about my trust profile. It
Mhm.
doesn't tell you anything about the banks really.
Mhm.
That's me.
Mm.
But then other people would almost feel like they're monogamous with the bank. And if I would suggest having like an offsite savings account that's a little bit harder to touch,
Mhm.
almost the first reaction is, well, I'd never want to do that to Chase.
Mm. Wouldn't wanna hurt their feelings.
Right.
Uh,
Right. So that's very, very interesting to me. That is so rich to work with.
mhm.
Um, oh, one time, oh, I've forgotten about this. Oh, one time um, I was asking people in the beginning, like, in general, what are their assets and what are their debts?
Hmm.
And a woman who was in tremendous, overwhelming debt actually listed a line of credit as a cash asset.
Hmm.
She thought that that amount of money, because she could spend it, she thought of it as a savings account.
Hmm.
And that just touched me so deeply
Hmm.
as a real, like, okay, I can see how the mind went that way. That's not like an intelligence thing per se. Like, yeah, she could have taken some of that money, and but
Hmm.
it so didn't encapsulate the impact it would have
Hmm.
on her whole picture if she were to use it as
Hmm.
liquid cash. So sometimes that denial around what's the intention of a product, um, I want to help people know their tools
Hmm.
and know the parameters of it.
Hmm.
So they're not in some kind of blindness about the impact it would have on them down the line.
Hmm.
I went through a pretty hardcore Dave Ramsey phase.
Hmm.
Um, my first mentor in this area was a Dave Ramsey counselor, and I went into that all the way to the point where I almost had like this third rail reaction when someone wanted a credit card.
Hmm.
And I've gotten out of that where credit cards, they're a tool. And if people are able to use it responsibly and clearly, okay, so it's a tool, but like know the difference between a shovel and a hoe.
Hmm.
And that that feels like an important part of the work as well when it comes to options.
Hmm. Does I guess in the work that you do, does debt, how large a role does debt play in the situations that people are coming to you to help uh, figure a way out of?
I have changed my beliefs when it comes to that,
Hmm.
and I let them let me know how much of a role it plays for them.
Hmm.
So I tend to assess how much does it bother you? And this job has really been so humbling and has taught me, like, one person can have $1,000 that they can't yet pay off on a credit card, and it keeps them up every night.
Hmm.
And I had one person come to me who even earned less than person A,
Hmm.
had $150,000 of debt, credit cards and student loans, and legitimately didn't bother her that much.
Hmm.
So I have to kind of draw a line and not use the mentality of, well, what would bother me?
Hmm.
Because we're also different when it comes to that.
Hmm.
So really, yeah, sometimes there can be denial, or sometimes there can be a shame that limits the person from fully feeling the impact.
Hmm.
But most of the time, I just want to follow their lead on that. And
Hmm.
if it's not a huge pain point for them, if they're just in that place of, I'll pay the minimums for now, but I really want to work on something else, then I feel like that's up to them.
Hmm. And that's where the goal setting framework becomes useful, because if, yeah, they're interested in travel, then maybe the reduction in debt becomes a background thing. Which I know I have some familiarity with Dave Ramsey's kind of philosophy of things, but he is like pay down debt as the first priority and then stay out of debt as much as possible, right?
His baby steps say save $1,000 first
Hmm.
as basic backup,
Okay.
then pay off all consumer debt before saving for anything else.
Okay.
Then save 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses.
Hmm.
And then once all of that is in place, and if someone sort of increases their debt again, you would pause that 3 to 6 month saving and go back.
Hmm.
So it's a very orderly progression. And then after that comes saving for kids' education, retirement, paying down mortgage, so forth.
Got it. For you, maybe personally, or just if you were in charge of the world, and
Oh.
what what role at this point, post your Dave Ramsey phase, it sounded like you're in a different place now than you were at some point in the past with relation to that philosophy. Um, but separate from the stuff that you do with clients, or the way that you would advise them based on their specific goals, what does a healthy relationship with a credit card look like?
Well, I can go lots of different ways on that.
Hmm.
I am fairly financially conservative by nature.
Hmm.
On the one hand, it appeals to me if I can find one that I don't need to pay any extra money for and it's going to give me some sort of reward. That appeals to the conservative nature of great, like sort of free money. I'm taking a risk, but if it's a healthy risk, okay.
Hmm.
But honestly, in my bones, why mess with it?
Hmm.
And especially given the amount of sickness and invisibility of what goes on financially for people, and the lack of understanding. Like I love that aspect that's come out of social media where if it's free, you are the product.
Hmm.
If people knew that more and went, okay, I'm the product, but let me have my eyes open about that,
Hmm.
maybe. But yeah, I'm honestly in my heart feel like it's running with scissors.
Hmm. It's a good mental picture. Um, what about from a budgeting perspective? You've mentioned YNAB, you need a budget. Are there other budgeting tools that you found useful, MoneyMinder or Mint or other budgeting software that people seem to like, or that you refer people to?
Yeah, so YNAB is definitely my number one.
Hmm.
And I know that there are two types of people that I've seen just can't get with it.
Hmm.
So I know I do need some backup
Hmm.
referrals. Um,
What are those types of people?
Number one, they legit are not going to take the time to do it.
Okay.
That even if there's that sense of, I'll be good, I promise, I'll do, I want someone to get hooked up with something that's going to last for them and be sustainable.
Hmm.
Like, for example, I do the YNAB updating for a couple where they both work full time, really demanding jobs, and they have 3 young kids.
Hmm.
They are not going to sit there and spend half an hour every week categorizing and all that stuff. So they've delegated that to me, and that's a nice way to keep it going.
Hmm.
But if they didn't have some of the disposable income to hire that service, I would recommend a different tracking system for them. I do not recommend Mint unless somebody is already actually using it.
Mhm.
I think it's interesting because when I ask in my initial questionnaire, have people ever used a tracking system in the past?
Mhm.
So many people say, well, I downloaded Mint, but I never look at it.
Yeah.
By name, lots and lots and lots of people. So I think it has a lot of name recognition, but I've not heard people who actually
Hmm.
got use out of it. And the YNAB budgeting, tying together months and
Hmm.
being able to go out into the future,
Hmm.
oh, to me, that is just delightful.
Mm,
Whereas the last time I was in Mint, you can only operate within the current month. Like
mm,
last time I was in there, I couldn't have touched my December numbers
mm.
to make a plan to adjust for the fact that holiday gift season is during December. It's
Got it.
so if people are not going to touch it and are like super super busy and they're not going to be able to get fully engaged, like okay, meant to sort of aggregate things and know it'll probably guess things kind of 60%, but then they'll have this big clump of uncategorized. It's better than nothing.
Mm,
um the other one that I've told people two other ones from time to time that are a little bit less labor intensive
mm,
than YNAB. And one is called Bucksfur and one is called Wave.
mm.
Um, I find those extremely straightforward, not as sophisticated budgeting wise, but in terms of tracking, I do find them just a better design than Mint is.
Okay.
And I would say most people have that I've recommended, like, well, if you don't want to use any tracking system, there's always pull cash out,
Mm,
categorize it before you spend it, and put it in different envelopes. Like, that's the oldest school budgeting system.
mm.
And almost everyone goes, but what if I get robbed? So there's that. I mean, like, yes, and
Yeah.
there's, but once I get out of bed, a lot of shitty things can happen. So there's,
Yeah.
uh,
You live in Marin. We live in San Francisco.
I know, ironically, I used to live in San Francisco, literally got robbed there a couple times. So, yes, I know.
Yeah. As we close things down, going back to the question of debt,
Oh my gosh, Joe, this time has flown by. It's been like 5 minutes. You're asking such good questions.
thank you. Um, when you think about borrowing or debt as a concept, are there, in your mind, are there reasons for it to exist? Are there helpful, healthy ways or reasons to borrow? Um, let's hold interest rates or fees, predatory practices, hold that out of the equation. If everybody is doing, uh, behaving well, are there reasons why borrowing should exist? And if so, what do you imagine those to be?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes up is how unlikely it can be for it to be all the way above board, for someone to really take the time to read through all the conditions and fully understand it. And so part of what would have to be in place is someone really having the bandwidth to
Hmm.
even take in and move at a pace that's not like instant gratification
Yep.
to engage in the relationship.
Hmm.
Um, I am not anti-borrowing. I am, I'd say, pessimistic about the likelihood that both parties are fully above board
Hmm.
and that an individual is aware of the impact on their longer term.
Hmm.
Um, this is where there's all the difference in the world also between hypothetically what's possible in someone's finances and then life actually happening.
Hmm.
I went to this conference one time with a bunch of financial advisors,
Hmm.
and I felt so at home with how conservative they were. And like, even just in regular conversation, like when we went out for a meal together, people got out the cocktail napkins and the calculators, and we were all out about worrying about that stuff, you know? So for the nerdier folks, okay, like I'm geared to want to read through it all, ask questions, be naturally curious about it, but also have kind of a healthy skepticism about, all right, what's in this for you? So there is that persona that tends to work a little better with it, but also not see it as a fix or a saving grace necessarily. The people that I'm kind of geared to feel concerned for don't seem to naturally feel that concern for themselves. So who's right? Like maybe they're going to have less stress in their life and it's cool. And maybe we should all be borrowing more money. Maybe I'm just a worrywart. I don't know.
Nice of you to offer that possibility.
The classism inherent in our society really arose as well with that question of, well, yeah, like part of what it takes to go well is someone is given a certain level of respect because of what is assumed about someone if they have money. So that irony that someone is treated well and is going to get a better deal if they have a bunch of money to begin with. But the people who mathematically you would think would be supported more by being given the opportunity to borrow money and get a leg up and have some capital to work with. Even the words that we use to describe it are so loaded with classism that to me, it hurts my heart. And what will motivate companies to change when it comes to that? If just making more money has been the motivator and they don't perceive they can make money from people who don't have that much money to begin with, then how does that shift?
Yeah, I think that's a good, and that operates not just on a company by company level, but also a systematic level.
Yes.
Operating. Yeah. So I think that's hard to crack, but I do think, there are lots of examples of, even the credit union as a system of credit unions came about in the 1920s or 30s because a guy thought, he had seen community banking work really well in the Philippines and India and wanted something that was more cooperatively owned, cooperatively controlled, small, that could look out for working class people who didn't have the same advantages as others. Obviously, as it's turned out over the last almost 100 years now, credit unions are subject to the same market forces as larger financial institutions. So they slowly are blending into, kind of mutated versions of the same thing. But I think the original insight still holds some value. So I feel like there's some stuff that, looking top down, you could probably design a different type of organization that maybe could have a different charter and might be able to do things more sustainably. But I also think, to your point, we've made such advances in education design, getting better and better at communicating complicated things to people of varying levels of interest in whatever the thing is. And yet you still get, at the opening of a credit card, a giant piece of paper that folds out like 6 times and has size 6 font, that's using language that, for me, even as somebody who's worked in this industry for 8 years, is oftentimes confusing. So how is a person who has no interest in that and doesn't have the same technical expertise, what are they supposed to do? So I feel like there are lots of opportunities. It may, even if, let's say, all of this work goes amazingly and somebody opens up a new cooperatively owned, not-for-profit financial institution that issues a credit card that's got this amazing digital experience that really helps people understand what they're getting into and they're operating in their customers' best interest because their customers are also their owners, we could still find out that it's all for naught because people will just continue to push the envelope until it's not worth it anymore. But I feel like there's so much room that it's at least worth exploring. So
Absolutely. And it's, I think some of the education is about also it's a relationship.
hmm,
And sometimes the presence of a lot of money can skew the power dynamics in a
hmm,
relationship.
hmm,
So I try to remember that as an individual consumer that, yeah, I have rights and I made an agreement with them.
hmm,
And just because if we went to court, they could pay more for attorneys than I could. Like there's all this stuff that goes into that,
yeah,
but still giving people the sense of self respect and dignity
hmm,
and having their humanness count as valuable
hmm,
is very interesting to me, and also absolutely easier said than done.
yeah. No, but a powerful, powerful idea if you could figure out a way to execute it well uh,
Mhm.
at a scale. Well, thank you for talking with me. I really enjoyed this conversation, our conversation from before. I hope we get to keep in touch. My process is kind of, like I said, I'll take the interviews that I do, try and take all of those and roll them up into kind of thematic observations about what seems to be happening. I'm going to do kind of a design session with a few folks who have more expertise around, um, organization design, credit card infrastructure, and financial modeling, that type of stuff. To say, given all of this, what could you create that would meet some of these needs, and then um, put together a report. Part of my graduation process is to publish a report through the university that says kind of like, here's all the reading I did, here's what I found out in these interviews I conducted, here's what I think should exist, and then I'm also going to try and spend some time thinking about. I suspect it will be um, talking about why it won't exist, or why it wouldn't, why it wouldn't be in the interest of a financial institution to create something like this. Is there someplace else in the world where something like this could live? That type of thing. So that should be out and published by like April of next year. And
Wow, you got a lot to do.
here's my kid. The reason that I'm working on schoolwork the day before Thanksgiving, and we'll be working tomorrow too. Um, So I'll make sure you get a copy of that whenever I'm done. Give me 6 months, and I'll send you something. But in the meantime, if I have any questions, or if I'm looking back at the transcript and questions come up, I might follow up with you.
Wonderful. I'd love to stay in touch with you. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
I'm glad. I hope you have a good Thanksgiving and stay
Thank
dry, warm.
Thank you. You too. And I would love to get the recording. When I pressed record, it said the whole
Okay.
administrator thing. So I figured I'll just get the file from you when you have a chance.
Okay. I'll hit stop.